Hello.
Today's conversation is on the concept of flow. I've heard you mention flow many times, and I thought that today we would go into a deeper discussion, deeper than we've ever gone before, on the concept of flow. Flow being the effect of a certain state of mind, flow state of mind, and flow being felt by how you engage. I call this five sensory integration with what we're doing on the day-to-day journey, what we are experiencing, the different circumstances, in a way that we experience deep connection, presence, one with. Before we get into discussion, I want to reflect back on an experience that brought me to this level of understanding. Back in 2017, I went for about 3 weeks to Playa del Carmen, Mexico. While I was there, I had an insight, inner voice conversation. And I reflected and realized that there was major contributing factors for success in my life. And there was periods of times where I was experiencing, you could say, quantum leaps or rapid progress. Now, we discussed quantum leaps in one of the last videos. I'll put a link in the description to that. I recommend you watch it. And I recognized that if I could bring myself into a certain state of mind, I would have more of these breakthroughs, innovative thinking, accelerators, or quantum leaps. And I said, what was the difference when I look back on my journey of what facilitated those and the times that did not? And right away, I was reminded that it was flow. Flow is essentially where challenge meets skill. It's where we are deeply engaged in what we are doing, and we're noticing that we are one with what we are doing, otherwise known as autotelic, one with, and we're experiencing something where we really understand, interpret, a lot of times intuitively, the integration of our mind, inner world, and the outer world, the five sensory experience. Now, on the entrepreneurial journey, this is very valuable, because what are we working with when it comes to the outer world? We're working with relationships, we're working with resources, we're working with assets, we're working with opportunities, and with our mind, we come up with creative ways of connecting them together to produce innovation, to produce value, to produce results. Now, this is what we're doing on the day-to-day journey. And what I found is that it was facilitated to a higher degree while I was in flow. So from that day onwards, I made a commitment that I was going to maintain flow, make flow a priority on my day-to-day journey, and see what happens. Now, as a result, this was back in 2017, what I found was that I was able to maintain flow, find the different ways to get into flow, and that's what we want to stimulate in this conversation for you, as well as I was able to recognize and cross-reference how flow translated into results based on being in what I would call ideal state of mind or flow-based state of mind. Now, this is something that you really have to experience. So reflect back on your life. As we go through this video, recognize that your best performance, the quantum leaps, the breakthroughs, the insights, the perspectives, the connection with intuition was found when you were in flow. So there's different levels of flow. And I recommend having a certain baseline of flow. How do you know you have a baseline of flow that is in harmony with your vision? Well, you feel lighthearted and you feel connected with your mission and purpose. each day, and you'll find a deeper connection as the days go by. Number 2, creativity, intuition, and understanding of the day-to-day journey is accelerated. You find more joy when you wake up each day. You find more joy when you are doing what you do. And you find that you're making not just incremental progress, but having more of these quantum leaps as a result of this state of mind. What you'll also find is that there's higher peak levels of flow. And you may find yourself in these higher flow states of mind when you're deeply engaged in certain key activities. For example, for me, it's public speaking. It's when I'm doing consulting. It's when I'm creating these videos. And it's when I'm doing other activities that might not be related directly to my goals, my visions, my aspirations, such as snowboarding, going to the gym, going for a walk, and doing different things that bring me into this state of mind, maintain this state of mind, dwell in and from this state of mind. So I recommend making a study of yourself and identifying each day what are the things that bring you into flow, what are the things that allow you to maintain your flow, and what are the things that break your flow, knowing that you can change either how you relate to those things within, or you could change those things, and you'll find yourself in deeper levels of flow. Again, what are the reasons, the effects? Well, accelerated results, deep engagement, as well as quantum leaps. Happiness and deep engagement in the present activities is based on our interpretation. As a result of our mind and how we believe reality to work, we interpret what happens on the day-to-day journey. And the different activities that we do each day, what we engage in, what we participate in, where we show up in the environments, and how we relate to these elements is based on our interpretation. So we have the power to, as we've been talking about this, change how we relate to these elements. And what I found is that our relation to these elements, the relationship we have with them, is facilitated automatically, intuitively, from a degree of connection one with when we're in flow state. So flow state, also known as being in the zone, is a mental state in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in the feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity. The journey and the destination is felt and seen and experienced as one. It is complete absorption in what one does, resulting transformation in one's sense of time. Now, the power behind this is deep engagement, or as Eckhart Tolle talks about in The Power of Now, being in the now. Flow is a state of mind in which we are deeply involved with activity or life experiences to the point where fears, doubts, and indecision are excluded out of consciousness. So this is something that we all want to experience on the journey, is whatever it is we're doing, whatever desire that we have that we want to see brought forth, we know what we need to do to produce the results. This is found within via inspiration, intuition. And this inspiration is something that is deeply connected to what I refer to as the true self, who we are truly meant to be. So much of this journey is about revealing the true self, and I've been discussing this over the many videos. However, we know when we have a connection to this true self, when we find ourselves releasing, a lot of times automatically, and facilitated by flow, a lot of times the fears, doubts, and indecision-based thinking that we have accumulated from past experiences in our life that have no correlation to what we are doing, our goal, our desire, our aspiration. And it's one thing for me to say to you, exclude it out of consciousness. Now, I'm a big fan of working with affirmations. So you can work with affirmations to exclude these elements out of consciousness. What you could also do is work with the concept of flow, and we're going to go through the process to automatically exclude fears, doubts, and indecision out of consciousness. Now, notice that this is not new to you. All of us have experienced this a lot of times in earlier stages of our life, when we were children, when we would be deeply engaged in what we were doing, be it an activity, a sport, something that may had an element of fear, and doubt and indecision that could have been a potentiality. But for whatever the reason may be, it was excluded out of our consciousness. That's because in that moment, we were experiencing flow. So flow is a state of mind that allows us to dissolve the resistance that we have within regarding fears, doubts, and indecision in relation to ourselves, in relation to our journey, in relation to what we're doing, in relation to the destination. And we do this by committing to stepping in flow and being in flow. Now, as mentioned, as I went through that journey after 2017 and committing to be in flow, I found my results in business, in personal life, in all the personal development areas accelerate, because at the end of the day, this is what you're going to be doing most of the day, is engaging in this world. So you might as well engage with it to the best of your ability from the perspective of flow. If you have an entrepreneurial endeavor, then probably 8 to 10 to 12, maybe even more hours a day, you're engaging in your business, directly or indirectly. You might as well consider doing it from a place of flow. Again, why do we do that? So that the mind is kept in an optimal state so that we can look at the outer world, people, environment, circumstances, the relationships, the resources, the assets, from a perspective that is designed to facilitate the outcome. In other words, we're able to transform what may appear as obstacles into opportunities. We're able to recognize the patterns, pattern recognition of how to connect these elements together to produce results, innovation, success. Achieving happiness and connection with our five senses via our inner world. So we're interpreting, while we're on the journey, while we're on flow, the five senses, integration with the outer world, people, environment, circumstance, and information, from the perspective of the vision, or as Neville Goddard puts it, living in the end, and seeing all in harmony and in contribution. You've probably heard me say this many times. Everything we experience is represented in the mind as information anyways. So you might as well represent what you are experiencing with the five senses from a perspective of in contribution and in harmony, automatically facilitated by flow. If we're able to control this information, we can decide what our lives will be like. So I always say this, it's not necessarily the circumstance, but the interpretation of the circumstance. And what's the interpreting factor? Or more accurately put, who is the interpreting factor? It is you. And so we have the power to interpret. And what we'll find is when we're in flow, we will accurately interpret. Now, who experiences flow? Computer programmers experience flow. Public speakers experience flow. Athletes experience flow. And you can replace flow with zone or any other word you choose to correlate and cross-reference that same experience, what we find where we're one with what we're doing, not overthinking. Now, I recently took up snowboarding, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. And probably in the next year or so, I'll probably take up surfing. I've always been into board sports since I was a kid, and I decided to get back into it. And I found myself re-experiencing all the things on different learning stages of my journey, no matter what skill I was acquiring, be it any entrepreneurial skill or whatever kind of skill, from the perspective of the information that we've been discussing on this channel, and recognizing that as a result of being in flow, I would find myself learning faster. And as a result, I would find myself going on the hills, practicing, and then when I'd go home, I'd watch a couple of videos, and rather than being overwhelmed by large volumes of information to the point where I get stuck in my head, I put more emphasis on practice and being in flow in the activity, knowing that intuitively and in combination with what I was learning, that information would assimilate in that moment and I would be able to accelerate my progress. And that is exactly what happened. When we're able to organize our mind to experience flow as often as possible, the quality of our life improves. Now, this is not just to be said about the direct activities that you're applying flow to or that you're finding flow in, but all areas of your life, such as my example that I just gave. Now, in the book Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he says, enjoyment is characterized by this forward movement, by a sense of novelty, of accomplishment. Playing a close game of tennis that stretches one's ability is enjoyable, as is reading a book that reveals things in a new light, as is having a conversation that leads to express ideas we didn't know we had. All of these are flow-based activities. It's a combination, a sweet spot, where challenge meets skill. It's where the skill is not perceivably too overwhelming. The key is perception, and that is in the mind. So that stated, those that find themselves in flow will find themselves better equipped and able in the mind to overcome complexity that could show up on the journey to creating success, all facilitated by the state of mind. He says closing a contested business deal or any piece of work well done is enjoyable. None of these experiences may be particularly pleasurable at the time they are taking place, but afterwards we think back on them and say, that was really fun, and wish they would happen again. In other words, we're so deeply engaged in the moment, we're so one with, that a lot of times when we reflect back on the journey of cultivating that skill or producing that success, we recognize that there was no other place we wanted to be rather than what we were doing at that time. That's how you could say, when you connect the dots looking backwards, you knew you were in flow. After an enjoyable event, he says, we know that we have changed, that our self has grown. In some respect, we have become more complex as a result of it. Or I would say, better able to manage the complexity, deal with the complexity. And the concept of self has changed. So thus the concept of self also changes as we commit to and maintain flow. Now we're going to talk about the elements of flow in a moment, but before we get into that, let's also emphasize the neurochemical properties of flow. So this is something that I'd learned from Stephen Kotler's book, The Rise of Superman. So certain neurochemicals are released in the brain when we are in flow, which contributes to how we feel, such as dopamine, serotonin, anandamide, and other endorphins. Now, anandamide is an interesting neurochemical. It binds to the CB1 receptors in the brain, and as a result of anandamide, we experience the feeling of bliss. Ananda is actually a Sanskrit word for bliss. So when we find ourselves in flow, we experience more bliss on the journey. Now, this can be very helpful because so many of us who want to create success or bring forth a desire or produce results may find ourselves overly identified with the outcome, and as a result, experience fear, resistance, and certain kinds of disempowering thinking and emotional reactions to the five sensory experience or circumstances on the way to creating success. Now, when we feel a sense of bliss as a result of the experiences that we have each day that facilitate bliss, then we'll find ourselves being less reactive. We'll find ourselves accurately interpreting the five sensory experience. We'll find ourselves more engaged, grateful, and joyous for the different things that we do each day in producing success. Now, that stated, let's get into how we can apply the concept of flow. So when it comes to creating flow, experiencing flow, having deep levels of flow, we want to actually pick activities that facilitate flow. That means in your entrepreneurial endeavor, there's really only a handful of things that you could do on the day-to-day journey. You could do what you do from a place of flow. You could delegate it. You can automate it, or you can eliminate it in part or in whole. Or if you know you have to do it, and you got to do it anyways, you might as well do it from a place of flow. Now, these important elements that I'm sharing with you right here are the components of flow, and what we can do is identify how to integrate these components, and we'll go through some examples on the activities that we're doing each day to produce the results. Number one, we've got clear goals at an abstract and granular level. So we want to have a goal. We have a vision. We have something that we want to see brought forth. Could be a financial number goal in your business. could be a specific end result. And when we commit to that end result, we have to assume in our mind that we have the ability to, and we will see it brought forth in some shape or form. That level of conviction, faith, and affirmation in the outcome. Now, what happens then is we have a day-to-day journey. And as part of the day-to-day journey, there may be activities that you would have to engage in that contribute to the result. This is really for those activities. And here are some important elements. By finding direction in relation to a meaningful goal, the mind is rearranged and recalibrated with purpose. So in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, he calls this definiteness of purpose, essentially meaning clear vision and clear journey to the destination, knowing that the journey reveals itself based on clarity of vision and the desire to bring forth the vision. He also says in one of my favorite books, Outwitting the Devil, the concept of drifting. Drifting is not flow. Flow is where challenge meets skill, and flow is deep engagement in the day-to-day journey to the fulfillment. It is actually a mind that is both consciously and subconsciously engaged in the day-to-day journey. Doesn't necessarily have to be consciously. It is outside of what he refers to as drifting. Drifting is where we lead to complacency and stagnation. So this is where we feel we have no vision, no purpose, no meaning, no destination, no desire to bring forth any of these elements. We experience drifting in the mind. And as a result of the drifting, our mind usually ends up going to things that are related to fears, doubts, and indecision, or interpretations of the five sensory experience in relation to fears, doubts, and indecision. So thus, we want to have a goal, and we can take this goal and go even further with it and break the goal down into granular level goals, such as, for example, if it's an entrepreneurial goal and you know that you're building a business where you're going to be selling a service or product using a website, then there may be multiple aspects to the project. Number one would be building the website. Number two would probably be putting together a social media presence in which you can bring awareness over to your website. Number three might be running a advertising campaign where you can bring some paid traffic over to your website. Number four might be involving joint venture or partnership opportunities that will connect the prospects based on the people that have access to those leads or prospects, or any other element related to the business. So we say the goal is the business success. Maybe it's a certain amount of income every month. The facilitator is a certain kind of business. And what's related to that business are these different projects. So we've got goals, abstract and granular level. So the way to do this is to actually carve out the time to do those activities. See, what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in a position where we can experience flow. If we're too overwhelmed by what it is that we are doing, then we'll find ourselves not experiencing that degree of flow. We'll experience unnecessary stress, convolution, and complexity in our mind. So thus, we want to set ourselves up for, and there's many ways of going about doing this. I have a productivity program that I put together. Learn about it on my online training for entrepreneurs.com website, so that you can maintain your ideal state of mind. So qualitative and quantitative key performance indicators are very important. Qualitative being, how do you feel? Do you feel connected, one with? Do you feel love to what you do? If not, then we want to make changes within of our assumptions, our beliefs, our interpretation that relates to the five sensory experience, as well as those activities. Perhaps there are different activities that you need to do instead of, as mentioned, with the things that you got to do each day. If you're an entrepreneur, you can only do it and optimize it better, or delegate it, or automate it, or eliminate it, both in part or in whole, depending on what it is. Now, as a result of having a goal, we go through the journey of what I refer to, and you've probably heard me say this many times, purification of the mind and purification of the intent. What are we doing on the journey? We're removing disempowering programming in relation to ourselves, in relation to the goal, the vision, in relation to the journey. Now, that's stated, and in reference to what I mentioned earlier, is that when you maintain a flow state of mind, you'll find yourself so deeply engaged in what you're doing that a lot of times that fear, doubt, and indecision-based programming or assumptions and beliefs that we have within will be automatically excluded out of our consciousness, thus further purifying our mind. Now, this is from the premise that I have discussed in many of my videos, that we are divine perfection. Who we are is perfect. And we only learn different disempowering programming about ourselves on the journey of life, and we identify this is what we're purifying, these elements, and it is experienced through flow. So having a goal, and perhaps even to help you facilitate seeing the goal to completion, breaking it down into sub goals, granular levels as mentioned, and you could break it down even granular if you'd like. Now, you would engage yourself in the activity, whatever it is that you got to do. So ideally, you want to then say, how long can you stay focused on one task all the way to completion? Now, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour. So we commit to, for 30 minutes or 1 hour, to stay engaged on the task that we're doing, whatever the activity may be. And we're looking for qualitative and quantitative indicators. Qualitative being, how do you feel? Do you feel the flow? Do you feel connected one with? Quantitative will be things like key performance indicators, number-based goals. For example, if someone's running a business campaign or a marketing campaign to bring forth more clients, they may consider multiple key performance indicators. How many messages were sent out? How many people opened up those messages? How many people responded to those messages? How many people booked the call with you as a result of those messages? How many of you actually showed up to the call and you were able to have a conversation with them? And how many of them converted into client? And how many of those who converted into clients came back and bought additional products or services? All of those can be put into number-based key performance indicators so that in your mind, you can see that your engagement is actually leading you to the results. Thus, it'll facilitate flow, immediate reporting, and feedback. Now, if you're doing activities, like for example, my snowboarding activity, you might not have a key performance indicator based on number. And the goal being to learn snowboarding, and the immediate reporting and feedback being your performance and the engagement with it, will bring you into that flow state of mind because you'll find yourself more engaged. Now, that brings me to my next point. Harmony between challenge and skill. So again, this is the textbook definition of flow, where challenge meets skill, where there's not too much challenge, but just enough challenge that you feel engaged in the process. You have the skill within, and you're further cultivating the skills. Challenge to further cultivate or perfect skills. And when a mind is engaged in voluntary challenge to accomplish something worthwhile in relation to your vision, or the different goals in relation to your vision, you'll find yourself in flow and you'll cultivate a higher degree of skill, faster, easier, and you'll find that you will transmute hard work into flow work. And the reason is because when you're in flow, you'll deeply engage your mind. You'll be so present to what you're doing. You'll find joy and fulfillment in the activity that you're doing, that you will find yourself tapping into infinite intelligence. You'll have the ability to tap into this in the moment and pull out abilities, insights, and perspectives that you may not have consciously known that you had to produce results. Now, as you engage in the activity, as you maintain the flow in the activity, you'll notice that action and awareness become one. You become one with, engaged. Attention is absorbed in the activity. We become so involved with what we're doing that the activity becomes intuitive and one with our goal. We become intuitive. We remove ourselves from over-identification with the conscious mind, and we rely more on the subconscious mind. And also, we find ourselves less in our head, not overthinking, not identifying with the fears, doubts, and indecision, mental chatter, and connect with what I also refer to, if you're very auditory, the true inner voice. Ideas, hunches, and inspirations are found within, in the activity, as well as when you're done the activity, you'll be able to reflect more mindfully. We become so involved in what we are doing that the activity becomes intuitive and one with our goal. We become capable of handling, as a result, large complex amounts of data or large complex amount of information in the activity that we're doing. Now, this is enormously powerful for anybody cultivating a skill, because you can cultivate your skill from a place of force and stress and frustration, or you can cultivate your skill from a place of flow. Now, these elements that I'm referring to you might seem like a lot and may even seem complex in the beginning. But when you study flow and make flow a priority, you'll find that you'll automatically reconnect, reestablish your already inherent ability to do this. As mentioned, we had this ability when we were children. Some of us maintain it all throughout our life, and others need to work on it to bring ourselves back into a flow state of mind so that we can make rapid progress towards the destination, while also experiencing the incremental progress and the rapid progress also facilitated by the quantum leaps. What I had found, and I had discussed in that quantum leap video, which I did a discussion on, I recommended being in a state of flow so that what would happen is that you would experience more quantum leaps. Radical breakthroughs, big insights, big changes in the outer world, that is a result of a state of mind, flow-based state of mind. And what we're talking about here is we're doing these activities that we know we have to do to produce results every single day, from the morning routine to the work day to the end of the day. You might as well do it from a place of flow, because when doing it from a place of flow, we'll find ourselves having more insights, breakthroughs, and outer world changes on our own. We call this quantum leaps to producing what we desire. Now, this will make a lot of sense when we reflect upon our own journey, as I did back in 2017, and found this was the case. Cross-referencing each breakthrough or big leap that I made in my business and different areas of my life, and then from that day committing to it and observing it happening again and again and again. And we also find that we release from, as mentioned, mental chatter, overthinking. We find ourselves making rapid, correct decisions, and we can see the connects, as referring to the earlier example, the entrepreneurship space, where we're really working with the outer world, relationships, assets, resources, opportunities, connecting together in creative ways, which the ways of doing it, you can learn it from different books. And I did a whole discussion on Jay Abraham's book, Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got, as well as the Mr. X book. That was a 3-hour discussion. Many insights gathered from that book. I'll put a link in the description. When you stimulate your mind with those videos, you'll find yourself bringing forth reference to that knowledge acquired from those books in the moment, allowing you to make rapid decisions, correct decisions accordingly, and seeing the connects between relationships and the nuanced distinctions of variation of this outer world experience in relation to your vision. Now, when actions and awareness become one, and by the way, this is experienced through experience on the journey, committing to flow, getting into flow, and reflecting back on this video. I recommend watching this video over and over again as you commit to and maintain flow each day to pick up even more of what I would refer to as the nuanced distinctions, so that you can further integrate this information and thus experience deeper levels of flow. So as our actions and awareness become one, distractions are excluded out of consciousness. Fears, doubts, and indecision taper away. And as a result of deep engagement in what we're doing, from the perspective of not being distracted, not having overthinking or unnecessary thinking regarding fears, doubts, and indecision, that is actually a form of affirmation, otherwise referred to as active meditation. And as a result of being engaged from this perspective, this certain state of mind, it becomes our identity, our self-image. We leave no room in the mind for irrelevant information as we become one with what we are involved with. So the benefit of doing this, so you're in this process, maybe a few hours a day, what you'll find is that becomes your self-image. How is the self-image or the identity formed on the journey? It has been a result of the repetition of the same information or the repetition of the same information from different perspectives. And if the information was fear, doubt, and indecision or distraction-based information, repeatedly again and again and again, the self-image and the way of being is formed from those experiences. So what we're doing is reverting back to how we really are, which is from the place of flow and love, and thus further being in activities from the perspective of flow, which is facilitated through this process here, excluding automatically by being deeply engaged what we're doing, fears, doubts, and indecision and distractions. We find ourselves affirming. That's a form of active affirmation or active meditation in relation to the vision, reconnecting with what I would call the true self. So thus a stronger sense of the true self, true identity emerges after the flow experience is over. So certain activities that you do, after you're done it, you'll feel more connected to who you are. Now reflect on your journey. You'll notice that this is what happened to you as well. After you are deeply engaged in the flow-based activity, you felt more alive, more like yourself. That's because you're reverting back to your true self, true identity. What also happens is distortion of time. So in the activity, time no longer seems to pass the way it ordinarily does. Hours seem to pass by in minutes in general. Most people report that time seems to pass much faster, but you're making a lot more progress. You're gaining a lot more skill. You'll find yourself affirming the ideal self and making flow more of a lifestyle and a way of being rather than a thing you do. But at times, the reverse occurs. So you might even find yourself slowing down time, or the perception of slowing down time. We'll find ourselves connected with what we're doing, and we're better able to process large volumes of complex data, make rapid decisions, and rapid correct decisions, seeing the connects and nuanced distinctions, as time may appear to be, from a distorted perspective, slower. Now, this happens automatically. This is what I found. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to consciously choose, now I'm going to speed it up, now I'm going to slow it down. It happens automatically because you are so one with what you're doing that you're actually tapping into this already existing potentiality. Now, as a result, the activity in the person becomes autotelic. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi says in the book Flow, as we describe autotelic, which essentially means one with, so connected with the vision. Your identity, your self-image is so connected with the vision that everything in your life, everything you do has meaning, has relation, is connected, is related. And you find yourself so connected with your intuition that you build a deep relationship with it, and you learn to trust yourself in ways that you may not have done before. And all of this is facilitated through this flow process. And as a result, you know what is required to produce results. You trust yourself, you listen to yourself, and you move forward from that perspective. You find yourself less identified or not identified with mental chatter, and more aligned and more connected with your true inner voice, true intuition. He says an autotelic person needs few material possessions and little entertainment, comfort, power, or fame, because so much of what he or she does is already rewarding. Because such persons experience flow in work, in family life, when interacting with people, when eating, even when alone with nothing to do, they are less dependent on the external rewards that keep others motivated to go on with a life composed of routines. They are more autonomous and independent because they cannot be easily manipulated with threats or rewards from the outside. In other words, seeing this world, as we refer to, from the perspective of inner locus of control, seeing the outer world as a reflection of your interpretations within. And he says also at the same time, they are more involved with everything around them because they are fully immersed in the current of life. So you find yourself more connected with others, with environment, with circumstances, with information. You don't see it as conflict, you see it as in harmony and related. You're able to accurately interpret. You'll be able to have the experiences that we interpret as distortion of time, and what is really happening as a result of that is being able to handle large complex amounts of data, making rapid decisions, correct decisions, seeing the connections between your inner world and outer world and the nuanced distinctions of meaning, of understanding. Seeing how, as referred to in many of my videos, and Neville Goddard refers to this as everyone is you pushed out, realizing that everything is an individual expression of the one mind. This is experienced in this autotelic way of being, which is facilitated by maintaining flow more often. And here are some other effects that further remove resistance and unnecessary convolution and complexity in the mind and mental chatter. Experience is an end in itself. So you don't say the journey is better than the destination, or you don't say the destination is better than the journey. You see it all as one. It's all one. The activity that consumes us becomes intrinsically rewarding. Autotelic personalities seem to enjoy situations that others might not find enjoyable. Why? Because they see everything as in relation and in harmony to the vision, more and more so each day. And as a result, which is one of the important attributes of being more one with our vision, the ideal self-image that is in relation to the vision, is the recognition that our desire, our destination will be brought forth, and we know how to bring it forth. And on the activities, we can find flow, be one with, and as a result become autotelic. We find that unwavering, lighthearted persistence of a positive mental attitude in relation to the vision, in perhaps even the face of prolonged adversity, is what we experience. It's how we live. It's who we are. So flow is not only something that you can experience on the journey, but I also believe that flow, through my experience and working with many others who also went through this process, becomes a way of life. It becomes so integrated in the ideal self-image, the identity that is in relation to the vision. And as a result, we live a more fulfilling journey over to the destination, and we find ourselves less needy, desperate, or force-based, or resistance-riddled on the journey, and more in harmony with people, environment, circumstance, and information. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.